I'm Dale Mathis, and this is lesson 23 of Dale Mathis Slow and Easy Accordion class, and I'm calling this one banjo chords. And I'm using that as an excuse to use banjo sounds on the accordion, but I'm also going to be teaching you about chord inversions. Well, that sounds serious, doesn't it? But what we're going to be doing is taking a 3-note chord and just moving it around, just mixing up the note names. You always hold on to the same note names, but you flip the order of them. So you could have a G chord where the G is the lowest note, and then the D, and then the, I'm sorry, wrong note names, G, B, D. And then, instead of having the G on the bottom of the chord, or being the lowest tone, I'll make it the highest tone, and still play the other 2 notes. So we're going to be talking about those chord inversions, and the reason we're using chord inversions is because when you're going back and forth playing an accompaniment to a song, you don't want to be bouncing all over the keyboard looking for different chords played in the root position, when if you just invert the next chord that you need, the location is probably going to be quite close to what you need. So I've done something interesting here. I've recorded the songs once through with the melody, and then the second time I've added an accompaniment using chord inversions. Alright, so the songs that I'm using for this lesson are actually songs that you already know. They're from lesson 18, Red River Valley, and from lesson 8, Swanee River. And just an example of using those chord inversions, I'm going to take a G chord, which is right there, and then I need a C chord next, but rather than bouncing all the way up there or all the way down here, I'm just going to invert it. So here's the G chord, and the C chord has note names quite similar and quite close. And back to the G chord, and down to the D chord. So that very simple accompaniment sounds like. And if I picked the banjo, it would be like this. So this is sort of an intro into this whole concept, and it's just a way to get you started with the idea. So I don't expect you to understand this whole concept completely with just one video, and we'll be doing more on this. But let's just get started with what I presented for you today. Have fun with this. I hope it doesn't create too many headaches for you. Alright, so I've called lesson 23 banjo chords simply because I'm doing some songs with banjo as an accompaniment or as the lead line. But what we're really talking about is chords and chord inversions. So all along I've been talking to you about knowing the names of notes that go within a chord. And at this point it's just been you just have to memorize what they are. There is a theory for knowing all of this stuff, and I will be getting to that in a near lesson. But for right now, we need to learn about chords and chords inversions to help you with this banjo chord song. So first of all, there's something called the root position of a chord. So if you look at this C chord that I have here, you'll see it's C, E, and G. And then we have something called the first inversion. And the first inversion basically just takes the lowest note of the chord And instead of having it sound as the lowest tone, hold the other two notes that you are playing and invert it up 1 octave. So that's called the C chord in the first inversion. In the second inversion, you've taken that lowest tone and you've moved it up an octave. And in the root, an octave higher, you've done the same thing. You've taken the lowest tone of the C chord. It's still all the same notes, but you've just moved the octave. So here I've done the same thing for the G chord in the different inversions. So there's the root position. And you know it's in the root position when the notes are just a third apart, third interval apart. So if you've got a 4-note space between them, you know that a chord is not in its root position. But when it's in its root position, it's every other note name. So here we've moved the G chord into the different inversions. Here I've done the D chord, which you will need for Red River Valley, that tune. And here I've done the A chord. So you've got an A, a C sharp, and an E. And here, this is a different thing. This is the G7 chord. In the G7 chord, it's the same chord as the G chord up here, except that you've added an additional note. Now you have an F. So it's G, B, D, and F. And now you can have more inversions. So you've got the first inversion, second inversion, a third inversion, and then up an octave. Okay, so here's another demonstration of inversions. I'm using a keyboard here. So here for a C chord, we have a C, an E, and a G. So that's the C chord in the root position. And I'm going to take that chord and take my lowest note. Instead of playing the C there, it's like if I could just move my finger and play the whole thing up here, you hear the chord has a different intonation. Root position, first inversion, and if I move it up, move this E up an octave, it sounds up here. And then if I move it up one more, take the G, the lowest tone, and move it up an octave. So it sounds like this. So to make sense out of this, you've got to practice going between those chord inversions, and you've got to do it with all these different chords. And when you do that, you're going to find that a lot of accompaniment styles, like the banjo thing that I'm showing in this lesson, will begin to make a lot of sense as far as what are banjo players really doing. Or in polka bands, when they're doing fancy chord accompaniments, they're usually just taking the chord and whipping it around all over the place. So again, root position, first inversion is take the lowest note, the name of the chord. Root, you always know it's in the root position when you've got the name of the chord as the lowest tone, and you see it's every other note. And then when I move it up here, which is taking that C up here, see now there's a 4-note space between here. Move it up again, and so that 4-note space is still there. And here's the third, and then move it up an octave. There we go. Isn't this fun?